want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Welcome to Dude Intrude, where we blow each other's phones up with random questions. Today, I'm going to bother Jake with a bunch of questions about football, which is not his favorite sport. So we'll see how this goes. Do you actually dislike football, or are you just trying to be contrarian?
Well, yeah, I actually do dislike football. And that's the English major there, trying to use words like contrarian to slip up the attorney. Originally, I loved football. And the funny thing is, I never enjoyed playing it as much as I loved watching it. You stand out there, and it's 20 below wind chill in the middle of friggin' November. You're going to be wondering what the hell you're doing out there in frickin' capri pants. The reason why I actually moved from once loving football to where it is now is because it absolutely bores the shit out of me. Every 40 seconds there's a play, and only 2 out of every 10 plays actually yards seem to be gained. Reality across all of that, the biggest reason that I hate football now is because the game that I watch now is not the game that I watched when I actually loved the game. It was a sport that has been completely modified by shit rules and people that have destroyed the game for being more appropriate for television and sponsorship. I guess that's the point. I mean, when you have 2-minute warnings that come on specifically so you can watch commercials, it's ridiculous, right?
Name one change football could make that would appeal to people like yourself who have moved away from the sport.
I don't know, man. It probably would take more than one. It hasn't been one change that made me drift away. I look at the fact that, like I said, the rules are really... If they would get rid of some of the rules, maybe change the play clock to 20 seconds, that would help. It would speed up the game. But I know there's purists out there that don't want to hear that, because I'm that way with baseball and with European football, right? So I don't want you to touch the rules. Leave them alone. I like the sport the way it is, so I can honestly accept the fact that most football fans would probably tell me to just shut the fuck up. But I would say that if you wanted to draw somebody like me in, you would have to redesign the defensive penalty system. Because when I watch a game and I see a fantastic play by a defender with 4 minutes left in the game, and there's the team with the ball is down by 8 points, and they throw it 75 yards down the field, and somebody grazes somebody's shoulder with an elbow when they're trying to, knock the ball down, and they're called for a pass interference. It's the amount of ridiculousness that is those type of plays makes me just watch the game and go, what a waste of fucking 3 hours this was.
Touchdown celebrations. Love them or hate them?
Am I against the touchdown celebration? I could give 2 shits because I don't watch football, but if I equate it to something else, I used to be of the opinion that no, I wanted you to put your, hand the ball like Barry Sanders to the referee. You're humble. You've been there before. Have some class. Act on. Now that's what's pushed on you by people. But I also think that now it's gotten to the point where it's having a little bit of fun. Right? You're trying to have a little fun and trying to do, what's exciting to the crowd, what's exciting to the team, and get your team fired up. Especially if you cut down a couple of touchdowns. And I could see why opposing teams would be pissed. But I think, a little bit people need to kind of grow up on the opposing team, because when you score a touchdown, you can turn right back around and just, give them the big middle finger. So I'm kind of all for it. I think it's an acceptable evolution of the game, and I think that, just like the bat flip, I think it's hilarious. So why not?
Who is a player that you loved growing up that nobody talks about anymore?
Barry Sanders is the greatest player that ever played football. And I think that... I don't think he gets the due. I think his impact, in my opinion, has changed the game in which it's played today. I think that he did things that no one else had ever done before. And I know they like to point out, the era of good running backs, right? So you're looking at people like Walter Payton and Dickerson, and even before that with Sayers and those kind of individuals that sort of... Sayers was good, but he sort of ran people over too. Walter was no wuss. He wasn't trying to outrun people. He was trying to run you over. But I look at that level of running back and what the running back was. It was a tough man's job. And I think what Barry did is he changed the way the game was played. Tree trunks for legs. The guys came in and broke ankles before people were breaking ankles. They'd seen a lot of maybe, stutter steps. I think you maybe seen a spin move or two before Barry, but you never saw 20 in a row in one run and have like an entire defense look just completely stupid.
Where is Tom Brady in the all-time great discussion? And I'm not just talking about football, I'm talking across all sports.
Man, I don't know, man. I was of the camp for a long time that if you had to pick a quarterback to win a championship and lead a team the way it should be led, and maybe it was because of nostalgia reasons, I would have always chose Joe Montana. And I, you know, again, growing up in that era, there were a lot of great quarterbacks. I mean, there was, you know, John Elway. Even at the later years, it was, you know, I really appreciated the hard effort and work that Brett Favre put into the game. Those are the kind of players that I drew myself to, the ones that worked their fucking asses off, right? Even Jim Kelly, his perseverance over those years working with the Bills and those Super Bowls. I mean, so you can idolize some of those players, but of all of those, Joe Montana was what I thought was the greatest quarterback to ever live. And I still, to a certain extent, maybe it's because I hold on to that, still think that Joe Montana is probably the greatest in my mind. I look at somebody like Tom Brady, though, and I think you can't argue with the answer to it. And the one thing that sets Tom Brady apart, I think, from Joe, is that Joe had Jerry for a couple of those titles, John Taylor, you know, whether you want to look at, I mean, just you know, they had Roger Craig and the defense, you know, with Keena and Ronnie Lott and some of the players that they had on that team. That team was just stacked every year throughout the 80s. I don't think they had a year where they were mediocre. And I think, you know, for all the love that Bill Belichick gets and for the Patriots, I think that it's a little bit less warranted, because I think the Patriots have put some pretty mediocre teams on the field, and Tom Brady, with his skill and his drive, which is similar to Michael Jordan's drive, there's an edge to the way he would lead a team, to the way he wouldn't accept failure. And some of those years, you know, sure, he had years with with Randy Moss, and those early 2000 teams were just fucking stacked, right? Those first 3 Super Bowl titles that almost don't count, right? That team was just so stacked. But I think as time moved on, you know, they had, you know, a couple of good years there with Hernandez and a couple of good years with Gronk, and, you know, you've had some pieces in place. But I think what he's been able to do over his career and now in Tampa is prove that you give me a couple of weapons, and I don't care what the offense is, I'm Tom Brady and I know everything about everything. And I think that's what sets him apart. He's had 20 some odd years, 22, 23 years. There's not a defense he hasn't seen.
How much do you love fantasy football?
I think fantasy football, flat out, is one of the stupidest things ever. But that's just me. That's a real easy question to answer. I think it's the only reason why football is still popular, in my opinion. Because without it, I think people would see what I see, because I don't see fantasy football. I think fantasy football gives people a reason to be engaged throughout the week when there is no game. It's half of what ESPN puts on TV now, so don't think that ESPN hasn't funneled that market since the mid-'80s. Or created or benefited, and you know, all these, I remember like Yahoo Sports and all these companies that were dying out were able to limp along for several years based solely on fantasy football and fantasy leagues. I think it gives the average armchair quarterback an opportunity to still feel like they're playing a game. And you know, perfect example, I can't stand fantasy football, but I thought the league was fucking hilarious, right? So I could watch it, and I could watch how ridiculous people are with their football leagues and stuff, and I thought that was funny, right? So I kind of feel bad in some ways for people that do fantasy football, but I also think that, you know, who the hell am I to feel bad? I don't have a better word for it. It surprises me that people feel like that is enough for them to be excited about the sport. You know, it ties a little bit to also people that have never played the sport and want to tell me who's good and who's not. And I think that if you're going to tell me who's good, you better not come at me, you know, 5'7" and $140, because I know goddamn well you've never played the sport and you have no idea what it takes to even be good at it. So I think that's where I get like insulted by these people on TV, other than the ex-players that want to tell me what a good player is and is not. Same thing happens with fantasy football, where these guys try to tell me that they have a couple of stat lines and they know who's good and who's not. I get so frustrated, you know, across the board, even basketball and baseball. People tell me, oh, this guy sucks because he does that, but they don't even know what it takes to get to that level. They don't know what it takes to even be a good player, but they just know because they read a stat line or something stupid in fantasy football and somebody gave them five points or whatever it was. And it makes for a lot of stupid conversations on my end. So I've always had a problem with people who've never played sports to pretend like they know about sports. So Maybe that's a little insight as well. But yeah, fantasy football, guys, you could do a lot better with your time than fucking worrying about other people's dreams. That's all I have to say.